Hey everybody, this is Andy from Tennis Euphoria, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Prince Synergy 98. This one sparked my interest because of some interesting features which we'll discuss soon, but also with Prince I've always felt that they actually make some really good rackets. The lack of endorsements on the tour mean that they're not particularly popular, and I just wondered whether the Synergy with its specs might prove to be quite a popular racket that will get used more commonly. Perhaps that's why Prince have put a paint job on this racket, which is reminiscent of the Head Graphene 360 Speed to appeal to the masses. Maybe that was also tactical because in their view perhaps they felt it was sort of looking at that speed marketplace, and I guess arguably you look at the specs and you think that this racket could compare maybe to the Graphene 360 Plus Speed MP or Pro. What I can tell you after playing with it is that this racket should be considered alongside actually the Wilson Blade V7 and also the Tecnifibre T-Fight RS. But to be more accurate, this plays much more like the Tecnifibre 305 XTC. So specs, we have a 305 gram unstrung weight, and mine was absolutely spot on. 32 centimeter balance point, mine was absolutely spot on. Perhaps quality control is really good from Prince. The interesting bits are the CTS beam, which is thicker at the top, thinner at the base, giving you more feel and also then more stability through the thicker beam at the top, and then you have a unique pattern in strings of 18 by 18. I think the other things to mention are you have a hefty swing weight with this racket of 333, and then you also have a really flexible RA rating which is reported to be 60, and certainly from playing with it, it does feel very flexible. Some further things to mention though is that the racket has an ATS anti-tort system at 10 and 2, and I did find this racket to be very stable. Also, I quite liked the sort of red lines across 3 and 9. Is that, you know, perhaps helpful for players to customize and add lead? And then quite crucially, they had some aerodynamic kind of grooves along 3 and 9 designed to enhance maneuverability. So a different take on some of the sort of Yonex grooves that we see. So how does this one play? Completely subjectively, passionately, the initial feeling on this one was actually that this was the favourite playtest that I have done so far, in as much as I instantly clicked with this racket. Now, from an objective point of view, I think there's an important thing to remember here. First of all, my competency around picking up a different racket and playing with it with enjoyment and relatively well, I think is improving. I'm almost developing an ability to just play with different rackets to an okay level. So that's probably an element. The other thing to consider is that actually this racket does play, in my view, quite similar to the Tecnifibre T-Fight 305 XTC, not the most recent RS version, and of course I played with that racket for a period, so it was an easy adaptation for me. What about the objective stuff? This does feel a little bit like the Blade V7 in terms of its flex. 333 swing weight means that you do feel like you've got a little bit of heft behind the ball, and it does feel rock solid stable, both at the baseline and at the net. What I liked, however, is that this is more maneuverable than the T-Fight 305 XTC and the RS, and I think that's probably down to those grooves. I think it makes the racket more aerodynamic and a little bit more whippy when you're hitting ground strokes compared to those Tecnifibre frames and also the Blade on your ground strokes. Meant for me that I felt I was swinging a hefty swing weight racket with quite a lot of maneuverability. And then the string pattern is also quite interesting. So the initial launch angle is certainly a lot higher than my racket of choice, the Graphene 360 Plus Prestige MP, as you'd probably expect. I actually found the launch angle to be similar to the Speed, but then you do get a good bit of cut on the ball as well. So I think this racket generates good spin and rotation. So as a result, I didn't feel that I was overhitting at all on the baseline. I actually felt I was getting quite a nice arc, probably a little bit of easier depth, and the racket still felt very controlled. Now, I'm personally a fan of the Wilson Blade V7. My criticism of it was that I felt just that sometimes it was unpredictable for me, and I preferred the 1820 just over the 1619. I didn't think there was a huge difference. I think this racket trumps the Blade with regards to that reliability. I don't think it has a huge sweet spot, but I've been feeling pretty good recently, both physically and in terms of my timing, so I didn't find that to be a problem, and I felt actually that when you're hitting pretty well, the sweet spot is ample and the racket is reliable and accurate, and I think it is more so than the Blade. The CTSP certainly does give you good stability, so at net it was rock solid. I was also finding that I was just sort of picking up half volleys and throwing my racket at the ball at the net, and it was getting a return back. I was hitting some quite sort of lucky volleys, and a bit like I used to enjoy with that Tecnifibre XTC 305, I found the racket to be quite good on defense, so you can get something on the ball slicing both sides or kind of just punching back, and you get good depth. You can also pick up on the half volley and penetrate the back of the court because of that stability and that heft of the swing weight. However, again, this works for me better than that Tecnifibre racket did because it is more maneuverable ultimately, I think, because of that aerodynamics. And then you have the feel. So it does have really nice feel. It is very flexible, quite buttery, and I like a RA of kind of 59 to 63. Certainly if you're somebody who prefers a stiffer, crisper feel, then you're not really going to get that from this racket. But for me, this is everything that I really hoped that the Tecnifibre T-Fight 305 RS was going to be, but of course the RS went down the route of being more dampened and much stiffer, so I prefer this racket to both that, the 305 XTC, and also the Blade V7. I was aware of a friend who was also hitting with the Synergy, so I asked to borrow his and offered to restring it for free if I could cut the strings out to check on quality control. His also was exactly on spec, 305 grams, 32 centimeter balance point. So again, I feel really kind of happy to report that I've seen it in the past, that prints for me are a bit like Yonex. From what I've seen, I don't know what other experiences are like, Yonex and prints seem to have better quality control in that regard. Did I find any knocks on the racket? Possibly only one. So I was finding great directional accuracy on my serve. I did have a slight adjustment period, and also I think I've lost a few mph on my serving with this racket next to my Prestige MP. Now, why is that? Power, ultimately, there's a mixing point coming together where the most amount of weight that you can handle at the fastest speed delivers the most power. And I think that's where this is challenged a little bit. So it's got that big swing weight and ultimately that low static weight of 305. And I don't think the grooves make it as aerodynamic over your head as they do with that sideways movement for baseline hitting. So whilst those aerodynamic grooves, I think, aid the maneuverability when you're hitting from the baseline and when you're volleying any sideways movement, I'm not so sure that they have the same effect when the racket's above your head and that swing weight comes into play a little bit. So I wasn't quite getting as much pace on my serve. However, I do wonder whether that would improve. So if you're a blade hitter or you're into that Tecnifibre 305, give this one a go. And if you're shopping around in that space at the moment, this should be added to your demo list, because I don't think it's going to disappoint people. Is it going to compete with the blade? It's probably not, because it just isn't endorsed on the tour, is it? But I think it absolutely should. I think it's really comfortable and the quality control seems really good. So 2 thumbs up from me. I think this is a really great racket that's going under the radar a little bit. Hope you enjoyed the review. I'd love to know your thoughts on this if you've been hitting with it, so please drop me a comment below and drop a like to it if this is useful. And if you're watching and haven't subscribed yet, it would be great if you did, because there's lots of racket reviews coming up that you might want to see. See you soon.